So Lizzo played a rare historic flute made out of crystal that once belonged to James Madison. She played it in a concert on Tuesday night and she twerked while playing it. And as a classical professional musician, I have a lot of things to say about that. But the main thing I want to say is that was actually pretty awesome. So thank you, Lizzo, for your enthusiasm for this instrument, for the awe and reverence with which you held it. Probably a little bit of fear too. I mean, it is made out of crystal after all, and one wrong move could kind of be bad. But I love the fact that you kind of brought recognition to this rare instrument. I would love to see more Lizzo with historical flutes in the future. Thank you for being such a great advocate of the flute and flute playing. I myself really love historical flutes. There it is. That's some of what you saw when you went to the Library of Congress. I just love this stuff too and geek out about it just as much as you do. So thank you so much. Small moments can have a big impact. About 40 years ago, my neighbors brought back this postcard from a trip they took to Washington, D.C. It depicts Theobald Boehm and two of his early prototypes of the Boehm system flute, and then, finally, the flute that looks very much like it does today. They also brought back this postcard. It depicts two flutes made out of glass and one made out of crystal. If that crystal flute looks a little bit familiar to you, yes, it is. The one that was owned by President James Madison, said to have been a gift of Lafayette, and it was made by Claude Laurent. As a young flutist, I was fascinated with this. I had never seen flutes that looked like this. I even brought both of these to my small town local library to find out more information. And while my local librarian was extremely helpful, there wasn't a whole lot of information for my teenage self to find out back in 1982 at my little library. But I did, through looking through an encyclopedia, find out that there were flutes similar to this, but they were made out of wood. And I had never seen anything like that. I didn't know anything about historical flutes, and as a matter of fact, I just called them old flutes at that time. From 1986 to 1990, I was a student at the Peabody Conservatory of Music in Baltimore, where I received my bachelor's degree in flute performance. And so there I had access to a really great music library, but even that didn't give me all of the information that I wanted. But I still kept looking for information, and I managed to get to try some instruments and even purchased one of my own. But basically, it was these two beautiful postcards that inspired me to find out more and to get into historical flutes a little bit. So you can imagine how excited I was when Lizzo tried that crystal flute on stage. Now, I know there's been a lot of controversy over it because people are jerks, but I am excited about it. Think about it for a moment. Her fans go to a concert expecting to hear what they would normally hear at a Lizzo concert, and then they also get treated to hearing her play this rare historical flute. And certainly they're going to talk about it. And so people are talking about historical flutes. And if even one person in that audience or one person who saw videos gets excited and wants to find out more and maybe starts to learn how to play these early instruments themselves and wants to see the collections, well, that's why this is another great moment in history. If you've been living in my brain the last week, you know I'm totally obsessed with the story of Lizzo visiting the Library of Congress. And there's one moment in her story that is my absolute favorite.
The U.S. premiere of this piece happened in the Coolidge Auditorium across the street. And Ron Paul played it. And this is the flute that Ron...
I can play it or no? Yeah. Well, my lipstick doesn't. Right? That's what I want to know. Oh.
So I'd like to break down that moment for you. She enters the flute vault, and it really is called the flute vault, although it's more just like a big room, and I know because I've been there. So they show her a manuscript of a piece of music and then talk about when the premiere was. And it's the Poulenc Sonata for flute and piano. And the manuscript is kind of messy because I've seen it. If you are a flutist, of course, you can recognize it, but you can't really play it just from looking at the manuscript because it's kind of a hot mess. So it's just further proof that she knows what she's doing and she knows that piece of music. The piece notoriously starts on a high E, and if you are a flutist, you know that's not one of our better notes. And that's why there are a couple of false starts for her as she's starting, because she's playing a flute that isn't hers, and maybe she wasn't even prepared to do any playing. I love how she asks if she can play the flute. So for people who are having such a difficult time with her playing these flutes, she was doing everything exactly right. She's also bent over, and it looks like she's maybe playing with bad posture, but she's reading off of the original manuscript that is in a display case, and it's not really at music stand level like we would normally put our music. So she's bent over looking at it. As I mentioned before, it's a little bit hard to read, but I wonder if you're playing the flute that Jean-Pierre Rampal, who did the premiere, if you're playing his flute and you're reading off of the original manuscript, that maybe there's more going through your head than just reading the actual notes, but just looking at that document that this composer actually held in his hand. It's kind of cool. And once again, I can't even express enough how excited I am that historical flutes were in the news cycle, even for just a little while. Obviously, I'm going to keep talking about this stuff, and I hope Lizzo does too.